Hello and welcome. Once again, my name is Dul Johnson and this is Dul Johnson's Creative Talks. It is a talk between you and I. It is our talk. Please remember to share this video, and if you have any issues, put your comments in the column below. Now, for a couple of weeks, I'm going to be responding to questions that have been raised over the weeks from people who have been following my videos. And we are going to be talking about the writer's block. Well, I didn't know that a good number of people were still having writer's block. I mean, it comes rarely for me now, but it's good to know that people still experience it. We're going to talk about it. Now, what is writer's block? It's important we all know what it is. You see, a block, especially when I want to explain the writer's block, I like to use the veins in your body, in your hand, for example. So there are veins here in which blood flows from one point to another. Now, if something happens and there is a clot in the vein, the blood clots, of course, the blood that flows through will not flow, will stop flowing. And then there will be, of course, a problem. There could be discomfort, there could be pain, there could be other serious problems, right? That's exactly the way the writer's block treats or behaves in our heads, in our minds. When we have a writer's block, what it means is that the flow of information, the flow of the muse, the flow of ideas that you are developing in the story ceases. The flow stops. And so you are at a loss. How should you make progress? That is what the writer's block is all about. And it could be a momentary thing. It happens when you are in the middle of, say, a scene you are writing. Or it could even be a major block, i.e., you are doing a long story and you've done 1, 2, 3, 4 chapters. And then at that point, you realize that you cannot move to chapter 5 or you cannot move to chapter 6. All those aspects of the writer's block. And the question is, how do you deal with it? So, I'm making this explanation for those who have not experienced it, or those who have experienced it and they do not know that it is the writer's block, so that you can now know how to deal with it. Now, the way I've explained this tells you that it is very much like what you can regard it as a disease, right? A problem in your body, a problem in your mind is a disease. And what the doctors tell us is there are two ways of dealing with health problems. We can prevent the problem or we treat it. But they also tell us that prevention is better than cure. So if I were you, I would think first and foremost about preventing the writer's block. So let me start with that. How do you prevent the writer's block? Often, what happens, and it's not as if I have not experienced it before, so I'm actually talking from experience. You see, when you are going to deal with a story, you really have to work out everything. You have to plan. I talked about you seeing your story from the beginning to the end before. You may want to go back to some of the videos, right? Now, what this means is that you work out every idea and capture them and write them down. Don't depend on your head, reeling out information as you go. No, it will not work that way. Therefore, let it be, my story is going to be 10 chapters. My story is going to be 50 chapters. This is what happens in chapter 1. This is what happens in chapter 2. This is how chapter 1 connects to chapter 2. This is how chapter 15 connects to chapter 16 and 20, and so on and so forth. You need to work those things out before you start writing. And once you do that, I'm not saying you may not have a momentary, break. That I will also talk about. But once you have prepared yourself, okay, you are not likely to have those problems. The other thing, of course, is from my experience, writing periods count. There are moments. Now, I didn't know this until about 5, 6, 7 years ago. If you have a specific writing time, you have mastered the muses, or the muses come to you very freely when you write at such a time. For me, it is between 2 to 6 a.m., sometimes 1 to 6 a.m. If you are writing within that period, it is quite unlikely that you are going to have a block in the real sense, right? So, 2 things I've told you. First of all, plan very, very well before you begin to write. And 2, choose the time that you are going to sit down and write. But of course, ideas can be coming at all other times. When they come, also make sure you jot them down and find a way to put them close to the chapter in which the ideas are going to be used. All of those will help you to deal with the writer's block. In terms of prevention, that is better than cure. Now, I want us to go to how to treat. You see, many of us know that if we drink water all the time, we are not going to have constipation. We know that if we sleep regularly when we are supposed to sleep, we are not going to have problems. We know that if we take our medication regularly, whatever problem we have is not going to be exacerbated and, that kind of stuff. But we still allow those things to happen. So, and sometimes they just happen anyway. That's nature. So let's assume that you've taken all those precautions and you still experience a writer's block. What do you do? My suggestions have always been, for me, for my students, and to any other person, that one of the things you can do is to stop writing, take a break, walk around. You can take a long walk, you can take a short walk, But best, when you are taking that kind of walk, allow the idea to be playing in your head. But also be prepared that if something clicks, you are going to capture it one way or another. That's 1. 2, sometimes I just play music around me. Beautiful music. I have some kind of music that I have prepared, for writing periods. And sometimes the music is playing while I write. Sometimes when I have a little problem, I wouldn't really want to call it a block. I do have moments of, maybe fatigue or, that I can't write. You may even want to consider that as a block. But I see it as just, I get too tired at a point and the ideas are not flowing the way they should flow. I can play one of my favorite tracks that I use for writing. And sometimes, of course, I take a book that I love, a book that is beautifully written, a book that I love reading. I take such a book and I read. That too can help you, come back to the mood, regain the ideas that were flying away from your head. Yeah, so one of the suggestions I do make is for you to probably just leave the work and do something else. especially when it is a long block, when it is a real block, especially when it is, say, in the middle of a story, you are supposed to move from, say, one chapter to another, and it is not working. I think you can take a break, deliberately take a break, and do something different. But again, I will say, whatever you are doing, continue to think about the story, continue to think about the problem you are facing, and of course, eventually, it will come back to you. Well, if you still have a problem with the writer's block, if you have a problem with any explanation that I've given that is a bit difficult for you, you can put it in the comments column, ask question in the comments column, and I can still come back to it at some time in future. So let's give a practical example. Let's say you're writing a story about a wedding. So there is a scene or a chapter that you are working on, and let's say you've put the groom on the road. They are going now to the wedding venue, and then in your story, you've decided that the bride is not going to be there, right? Or you just decided that this wedding is not going to happen. You may even have planned that, but the reason that the bride is not there is not something you can, nobody will believe that. So, and you can't say that it just happened, because nothing in story world happens by magic. Therefore, you have to be able to explain to the reader, you have to be able to give an account of why the bride is not showing up for the wedding. It cannot be that she just changed her mind. It cannot be, okay, that her mother just said she shouldn't come, or her grandmother just said, or whatever, The reader has to be convinced that you have actually worked this story out so that the wedding will not take place. The idea that, okay, the bride just decided not to show up and the groom is at a loss doesn't work at all. So it's left for you to resolve even before you go to write that scene. So when we read your story and we get to a point and we see the groom arriving at the venue of the wedding, and then we discover that there is no bride, of course, you must have prepared us for that earlier, and we must now have a very cogent reason why the wedding is not taking place. Now I'm saying that it can happen that you've worked out your plan, but you get there and you discover, in the course of writing, you discover that the reason you are giving is not working. And therefore, it becomes a block, which is usually a temporary block. How to convince the reader that this wedding is not taking place is what becomes your block. You really have to think, you really have to resolve that. Again, I think one of the things that I have used and told even my students to do to solve the problem of writer's block is to just write any rubbish, and I think many writers have said that they've done that and it works for them. Just continue to write and write and write and write and write. Sheets and sheets, pages and pages on your computer of rubbish. And suddenly, of course, the idea will come back and you will connect. Good luck.